Hi, this is Lori of Lori's Happy Stamps, and welcome to Meaningful Flowers, August 2023 Paper Pumpkin. I am very excited to share with you 7 alternatives today, along with the 2 projects that are featured in the Meaningful Flowers. And I just want to start out by reminding you that we received 2 stamp sets this month, and I put them on one single piece of paper, cardstock, and I covered the cardstock with packing tape, and then I stamped on it first and then put packing tape on it, and then I can easily lift up my cards or my stamps and see which stamps are missing, which stamps I have, and I did it for both sets on one card. So there's a little hint. Okay, let's look at the first card that the kit suggested, and this is the card. It's a sweet little basic card, and you open it up and it says your friendship is unforgettable, and then on the back it has a nice little sentiment that's pre-printed on there. So very easy card. I'm not going to go over these. I'm just going to quickly go over this is what they look like. And then the second card is done in Orchid Oasis, and it has this little piece of vellum in front of it, and then a little pop-out piece that says you are capable of amazing things. It fits back in there. It has some little, what do you call these, little gems that are like raindrops, water drops on there, and on the inside I simply stamped one of the lotus blossoms, and then again on the back there's a nice little story about a lotus flower. So let's go through and look at my alternatives, because those are the most fun. So from this envelope I got 3 cards, putting some of my pieces together with some other pieces that I have. So this is the first card, and it looks like this: the back of the envelope, then the front of the envelope, and then the card itself has a nice little perforated bookmark that you can take off as the recipient and use it as a bookmark. So I really like this card. And what do you need for this card? You need a piece of Tahitian Tide that is 5.5 by 10.5, scored at 4 1/4 and 8.5. So scored at 4 1/4 and 8.5 inches. And then what you're going to do is you're going to use this perforation tool, which is a new part of the Take a Pick enhancement tools. And you're just going to take a straight line. I used a ruler. If you don't have it, you can use the piece of cardboard that comes in your paper pumpkin kit. But you're going to align that score line, that 8.5 score line, with your piece of your ruler or your piece of cardboard, and then you're just simply going to follow this down the track, and you're going to then have these little perforation marks that you can punch out your bookmark with. So really fun and easy, and I think everybody needs that tool. So that's what you need. You also need a piece of the envelope. And what I did on my envelope is I just took a little teensy piece off of the right and the left, threw them away, opened it up, because oh my gosh, there's real estate all the way inside the envelope, so we don't want to let any of that go to waste. And what I did is I actually put a little water on the adhesive here, and then I wiped it off with a dry cloth. And then I used my embossing buddy, this embossing buddy, and I just went over it. So it took all the stick away, and then I could cut these little guys. So that's how I got the, to maximize my card. And so this piece is 1 3/4 by 5 1/4-ish, because I trimmed these. And then that's going to be glued right inside on your bookmark. Okay, you're also going to need one of the die cuts that comes in the kit. You're going to need some ribbon, and I am using the In Color 2224 Tahitian Tide for this one. You're going to need 2 little scraps of paper. One is 2 3/4 by 1 1/2, and another one is 2 3/4 by 1/2. I think I said 1 1/2. It's 2 3/4 by 1/2, and 2 3/4 by 1/2. And then I took a piece of white cardstock and cut it at 3 3/4 by 5 inches, and then I embossed it. And I embossed it using the Distressed Tile 3D embossing folder that's coming out. I also needed a piece of Daffodil Delight that is 3 7/8 by 5 1/8. And then I needed a piece of white cardstock for the inside that is 4 inches by 5 1/4. So those are all your pieces. And what I did is I simply glued the Daffodil Delight flat onto the card base. I did the same thing with the piece of embossed white, and then I bumped up the die cut on dimensionals. I stamped with Tahitian Tide on the piece of white. I glued the piece of Tahitian Tide behind that, and I glued it putting 2 dimensionals on the outside corners. On the inside, I stamped the Forget-Me-Nots, and I colored them with the Stampin' Write markers. I glued the piece of Designer Series paper on the bookmark, used a regular hole punch, and then I slipped my piece of ribbon through there, and that will become my bookmark. I just slipped it under to close it. And then I put a little one of the dewdrops on there, and 3 of the dewdrops on the front of the card. So that is the first card using part of the envelope. For the envelope itself, I just used the stamp on the front and on the back. I think I already covered that part. All right, and so then the second card that I made using that same envelope, I, hold on just a sec. I'm behind, and I don't want to lose out. Okay, all right, there you go. The second card that I made is I took my own envelope again, and I am using a one of the card bases, and I am on the envelope I stamped the Forget-Me-Nots on the lower left hand side. Then across the flap I did one in the middle and then one on either side and colored them in with Stampin' Write markers. And I took some of the extra pieces of cardstock, and what I did is I actually turned this so that this would be on the inside, and I closed this over like this. So, and I decorated it by gluing pieces of the designer series paper from the inside of the envelope. So gluing pieces of the envelope onto this white piece and then fussy cutting around them, and I get this. So when you open it up, you can see the flowers here. You can see the little information about the forget-me-not. I added a little strip from the side of the envelope, and I used actually a piece of the envelope, it's green on the other side, to stamp your friendship is unforgettable. I notched my own little flag and I bumped it up on dimensionals. I double tied the ribbon or the bow, and then I added 3 or 4 or 5 of the dewdrops, but I really think that turned out to be a really cute card. So again, I just took 2 individual pieces from the leftover envelope, glued them on there, and then I fussy cut them from the back. So I just fussy cut around the grass and the flowers, and there is card number 2 using that same envelope. So continuing along, I am still using bits of that envelope, that one envelope, and I am creating a 3rd card, and that card looks like this. And the envelope has the forget-me-nots down the side and across the back panel. Then I have your friendship is unforgettable, and this little piece of forget-me-not is from the front of the envelope. I went ahead and I just made 2 holes with my hole punch, and I strung a piece of Tahitian tide, and then on the inside put the forget-me-nots. So for this card, you need a piece of white designer series paper, cardstock, and it is 8.5 by 5.5, scored by 4 at 4 1/4. And then you need a piece of Granny Apple Green that is 4 1/4 by 2 3/4 inches. You need a piece of Daffodil Delight that is 3 inches by 2.5 inches. And you need a piece of Tahitian Tide that is 2 3/4 by 2 1/4 inches, along with a piece of the Tahitian Tide in color ribbon. So, and an envelope. So simple card to do. The only tricky thing is I bumped this piece from the envelope up on dimensionals, and I think it's about 2 inches by, let's see, it's 2 inches by 2.5 inches, and then bumped it up on dimensionals, then glued it onto the Tahitian Tide, which I then glued onto the Daffodil Delight, which I then glued onto the Granny Apple Green. I stamped in Pretty Peacock, and then I tore the bottom of the green, and I stamped on the white before I glued all of that on. And then I just strung this through and made a bow. So easy card, but I think it has a lot of impact. So those are 3 cards from one envelope. And now we'll look at the 2 cards that I made using one of these envelopes. So the first card is very similar to the to the one with forget-me-nots. So it looks like this, and you open it up and it's got the bookmark right here, and then it's got a little stamped piece on the inside. And for the envelope, it has the lotus and the pad there, the lotus and the pad here. Now, the only thing I really did differently here is I did use a mask to get those lily pads. And so let's go over the pieces real quickly. I did use a mask, and I used a piece of sticky backed paper. I stamped the lotus on it, and then I just cut around the bottom because that's where I needed to hide the lily pads. So I didn't need to fussy cut the top. So you'll need one of those, and you can use it multiple times. You need a 5.5 by 10.5 inch piece of Starry Sky, Starry Night. Is it Starry Sky? Oh no, Oasis, Orchid Oasis, and it's scored at 4 1/4 and 8.5. On the 8.5 side, you're going to do exactly what you did before. You're going to line up a ruler or a piece of cardboard, and you're going to use that new tool that comes in the kit, and you're going to just go straight down that channel. I do not recommend that you do it without something to lean the tool against. And you need your mask. You're going to need a piece of designer series paper, which is from your envelope, and you're going to cut your envelope open exactly the same way I did the forget-me-not one, and it's going to be 1 3/4 by 5 1/4. And you're going to use one of the die cuts. You are going to have 2 small pieces, basic white 1 3/4 by 1/2, and then the Orchid Oasis 2 3/4 by 1/2. Did I say 1 3/4? I meant 2 3/4 here. So they're the same. And then I also cut a piece of basic white that is 2 3/4 by 5 and embossed it with that 3D embossing folder again. You need a piece of Melon Mambo that is 3 7/8 by 5 1/8. And for the inside of the card, you need a 4 inch by 5 1/4 inch piece. And then you need just a basic white envelope. So those are all the pieces. And then to put that card together, you're going to glue the Melon Mambo onto the Orchid Oasis. You're going to then glue the embossed piece of white on top of that. Then bump up on dimensionals the lily and the pad. Then you're going to stamp in Orchid Oasis, You Rise Above the Rest. Glue the little panel of Orchid Oasis behind it. Add some of the water dots. I think I put 3, yeah, there's another one. And then I glued my piece of envelope onto the bookmark. I put a little hole at the top, and I added one of the little gems here, and then I used my stamps and stamped the lily pad. Then I put the mask over it and stamped the lily pad, and I stamped the lily pad in Lost Lagoon. But if you stamp off Pretty Peacock once and then stamp it, it's going to be really close. And then I used a little Daffodil Delight on the lily itself to emulate the one in the die. And then I did the same thing here. I stamped it with the Melon Mambo, added a little bit of Daffodil Delight, put the mask on it, stamped with Lost Lagoon or Second Generation Pool Party, and did the same thing on the back. So that's how I did that card. And then the next card I did was using again the pieces from the envelope, still the same envelope. I used a plain white envelope and I stamped the Melon Mambo and the Pretty Peacock, a little bit of Daffodil Delight with the Stampin' Write marker. I did 2 of them on the back, same thing. And here I used the real estate on the inside of the envelope. I cut out the lily and pad from the front of the envelope, and then 2 of the pads from the flap of the envelope. I then glued a piece of Pretty Peacock on there, and I put 5 holes with my regular hole punch, and then I laced some of the ribbon in through it and glued it on. And then on the inside I had a piece of basic white. I tore it at the bottom to give it some interest and stamped again my lotus flower. So for that card, you are going to need a plain envelope. You are going to need an 8.5 by 5.5 inch piece of Misty Moonlight, and it's scored at 4 1/4. Then you need a piece of 4 by 5 1/4 for the inside of the card that you are going to stamp on. You're also going to need a piece of some kind of a ribbon. And then you also need a piece of Pretty Peacock that is 3 3/4 by 5 inches, along with the piece of envelope. So what I did is I just centered the envelope to the right, so I had some extra space here, glued it down, and then I just eyeballed 5 holes. They're not perfect, and that's okay. And then I laced my ribbon through. I attached it with a little what is that called? Tear and tape. And then I added a free-form ribbon with a little glue dot. I glued the lily pads and the lily with dimensionals on the front, and then that's just glued flat. So easy, really an easy card, but I think it has a lot of impact. And again, that is using just one envelope. Just cut the edges off really, just barely cut them off, and then open it up, and you've got all of that real estate to use. And again, that bookmark is like the 1 3/4 by 5 1/4-ish piece. So I really like that card. And then here are 2 cards made from pieces that I had left. And this one looks like this. Hold on, I don't want to lose my flow here. I know you can't see, but I can. Okay, so this one, I took 1 card base and I made it into 2 cards. And so these are the 2 cards. I used the front on this card and I used the back on this card. And so for the 2 cards, you're going to need one of these card bases, and you're going to cut it down to 4 by 5 1/4. And if you cut it at the top, then you have the 2 pieces. And you'll use this piece for this card, and you'll use this piece for this card. On this card, I used a 8.5 by 5.5 scored at 4 1/4 piece of Pretty Peacock, along with a piece of basic white on the inside that's 4 by 5 1/4. And I used Melon Mambo and Pretty Peacock along with the Daffodil Delight for the inside. And on this card, I used a piece of white that is 8.5 by 5.5 scored at 4 1/4. And I also used a piece of white to make this little bookmark, whatever, little special note card. And that just fits in the front like that. And on the inside, I used Bubble Bath and Daffodil Delight, and stamped off once to get that stem for, and I used Pretty Peacock stamped off once, but you could also use Lost Lagoon. Either one works. And then for the envelopes, oh, hold on. So your piece of white that you need for this card is going to be 2 3/4 by 4 1/4. You're going to stamp using Bubble Bath and adding your Lost Lagoon. And then what I did is I just put this up to the trimmer and just kind of measured to the from the edge to the flower and from the edge to the flower, and then I rounded my own corners there, and then I fussy cut around the rest of the pad. Then you're also going to use one of these pieces for this card, and you're also going to use one of the pieces of vellum, and you'll see there's a darker side and a lighter side. I used the lighter side for this one instead of the darker side. I kind of liked that kind of wet look on there. And then I also used one of the tag pieces for the sentiment, and I used one of the, what are these called? Die cuts. Okay, so I think that's it. Have a great time, and I will see my Zoom group on Friday, September 1st. Your envelopes go in the mail tomorrow with all your extra bits and pieces. Have fun.